Внимание, внимание! Неблагоприятная радиационная обстановка. Провести временную эвакуацию жителей города.
Perhaps the hardest thing to see is this abandoned kindergarten. These little beds for little kids, abandoned toys. These dolls have spent the last 40 years or so on this piano, sitting in a row. And that looks creepy as hell, to be honest. This room is literally already set for a post-apocalypse movie or a horror flick. I think it's got everything the genre calls for. The dolls, the dead piano with a noir look that doesn't work, by the way. Radiation has poisoned everything here for miles and miles around. And there are no people here except us. My radiation meter keeps making a noise, and let me remind you that maximum permissible radiation level for humans is 0.3. And here, we've got 3 times that amount. It's terrifying. Frankly speaking, it's pretty unsettling. People, we are now in Belarus, close to the Ukrainian border, no more than a dozen miles away from the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. Back in the day, this area counted among the most prosperous in the entire Soviet Union. But the explosion of number 4 reactor brought a happy life of thousands of people to an abrupt end. We'll see the lands that will remain unsafe for habitation for hundreds of years. We'll visit ghost towns and towns with their abandoned kindergartens and houses where time seems to have stopped. It's the People Project, and today we are in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. My name is Maxim Boitstov, so let's go.
Are you subscribed to our channel? Not yet? The sad thing is that Anton can't go on his next adventure until you do. So pretty please, subscribe now. That's right. Go ahead, click subscribe. Well done and thank you. We can continue now.
People, I'm sure everyone has heard a lot about Pripyat, the town built to serve the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. But the fact that a quarter of the territory of Belarus was also affected by the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was kept by the Soviet authorities in secret for a long time. But the truth is that almost 70% of all radioactive matter from the exploded reactor actually landed on Belarus. Back then, it was known as the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic. Radiation struck almost 4,000 villages populated by a total of over 2 million people. About 500 villages simply ceased to exist. The People Project team, Max and Stas, are going to explore that area. The key requirement is to have your passport on you at all times. They told me to make sure that I have it and to show it at least a dozen times. The reason is, if they stop you inside the alienation zone and you don't have a passport, they'll detain you. The area with high radiation levels starts right beyond this checkpoint. We are on the border of the Belarusian part of the exclusion zone, known as the Polesi State Radio-Ecological Nature Reserve. Step 1, putting on our thermals. Because it's 5 degrees Fahrenheit today. After that, we get our safety instructions, sign in, and take our seats in this otherworldly UAZ truck that was known in the Soviet Union by its nickname as the Bread Loaf. Once we enter the restricted area, the view doesn't appear any different. Same as the forest before, but all this talk about cesium, strontium, and their half-life makes you feel different somehow. It's not the same anymore. And it really hits you that this is not just any place, but the place where something truly terrible had happened. The entire contaminated area is divided into several zones. Everything within the 20-mile radius of ground zero is the exclusion zone. People were evacuated from this area within weeks after the explosion, and this land will never be fit for habitation. Beyond the 20-mile radius is the so-called mandatory evacuation zone. Its outline is more uneven since it was defined by the level of radiation due to the spread of fallout. People were evacuated from this area too, only later. After a 20-minute ride, we reach another checkpoint. This one is more fortified. It's got barbed wire. Everything is painted red. All this because we're leaving the mandatory evacuation zone and entering the exclusion zone. This barbed wire dates back to 1986, when they set up the original exclusion zone with a 20-mile radius around the explosion site. This is Peter. He is literally a stalker from the zone. And probably like all stalker fans, I had a different idea of what a stalker must look like. Peter is not wearing a gas mask or a helmet. He's just a guy in a beanie hat and glasses. And yet, he has made over 200 trips to the zone. He's also told us that apart from the exclusion zone, Belarus has a lot of interesting sights to offer. The 20-mile radius exclusion zone has a perimeter of roughly 125 miles, and its area is about 170 square miles. It's completely empty. Only Max and Stas are there, and perhaps surprised wild animals. Have you seen things that are the stuff of legends? I've been working here 30 years, and I haven't seen anything like that. Here, see the moose over there? We've been assigned a detail. This very guy over here is in fact a local resident who lived in this area when the disaster occurred. I was at home for the weekend and they were at work, and his wife's brother worked at the firefighting station, and they were told there was an explosion at the power plant. No one thought it was something big, just some explosion, whatever. That fateful day, Mikhail came home from his college in the city and was planning to go to a dance in the nearby village. But then his brother came from work with bad news. Many of our friends and relatives worked at the power plant. Many had come here for work with wives and families. And people started to panic. On May the 4th, we got a call in the middle of the night informing us we will be evacuated. Can you imagine? You lived in a village and one day you're kicked out of here, and then you work as a ranger for 30 years, watching the forest take over what was once your home. Do you often go to see your village now, or not anymore? Well, sometimes, not much. I just take a look and go. You don't go to your house? No, but you used to. Well, at the beginning. All the time. All the time back then, huh? Yes. But not anymore. Well, I would see how things are in the house, in the garden. With time, I stopped wanting to. You don't feel compelled anymore, right? I remember my first days when I got this job. I wanted to see everything. I was glued to the car window. But with time, you get used to it. It's all the same, every day. Did you get this job to be able to come here more often at first? There weren't many jobs, but yes, I suppose so, to be able to see my home. Surprisingly, you forget about the radiation hazard in this place really fast, and instead worry more about taking your steps carefully because there is all kinds of debris on the ground. But once you turn the radiation meter on, you realize the hazard is very real. It's getting higher. The meter's noise is getting louder and more shrieky. It means that the level of radiation here is getting higher with every step we take, and that it's getting close to the life-threatening level. The level that's considered relatively safe is 0.3. 0.3, and we've got already 0.5. That's 2.5 times higher. The source of the hazard is the radioactive strontium-90, and right now, it's entering our bones and our bone marrow. The worst thing about it is it's going to stay right there for at least 20 years and keep on poisoning our bodies slowly. Look at this house. This place looks so alive. One can imagine a nice old lady might walk out any minute and say, "Dinner's ready." This one's as good as new. The doors are fully intact and the entire wooden floor. The time stands still in this house. Oh my god, this is an authentic Soviet-era bread box. My granny used to have one just like this. And a chair just like this one. This place looks like she might have lived here. I can picture her looking out of the window, watching her grandchildren. I walk in, and my imagination starts running wild. I can't help but wonder, who were those people who lived here? Because it's a big house. So, most likely, it was a big family. Here's one room, then another. They probably had kids. It looks like at least one high school student lived here. This history textbook was on loan from a library that apparently never got it back. It's in a very good condition. The pages aren't yellow. And this is a local brickworks. Mikhail used to come here when he was still a school student to get clay. He told us how he used to come here with his school buddy and have fun riding in a trolley while the teacher wasn't looking. Oh yes, we'd jump into it and ride it right into this wall. And the teacher and workers would hear the bang and come up to get us from that side, and we'd get out on the other side. We'd run downstairs, around the building, and then back upstairs again to take another ride. Here's another house. People obviously left it in a great hurry. They even left their car parked outside. Here's a bas-relief of Lenin, as was the Soviet custom, in very good condition too. This is the only Lenin monument in the Belarusian part of the exclusion zone. I heard there are none in the Ukrainian part, which makes it the only Lenin in the zone. Cool. The Soviet monument to the founder of the Soviet state sends us down memory lane. On April 26, 1984, the loss of coolant provoked steam explosions and a meltdown that destroyed the Reactor 4 containment building. This was followed by a reactor core fire that lasted for days. The authorities were trying to minimize the consequences by dropping lead, sand, and marble chips on the fire. On April the 27th, the entire population of the city of Pripyat was evacuated. Almost 50,000 people. People living beyond Pripyat were still kept in the dark as to what had just happened. Spreading radiation hit all the nearby villages in next to no time. It was all classified. We were issued Geiger counters with meters on sticks, we called them hockey sticks, to take measurements everywhere. I remember what struck me was that as long as I was taking measurements on asphalt, whenever I touched the bare ground or cow manure, the counter went crazy, making noise because the radiation level on these was extremely high. Valery Shumilov worked in healthcare in a town not far from Chernobyl when the reactor exploded, and he was there to witness the spread of the radiation. The clouds of hot steam, carrying the deadly cesium, strontium, and plutonium isotopes, cooled down and rained on the ground, contaminating it. The scariest part is that people living right outside of Chernobyl had no idea about the danger they were in. People in the village thought it wasn't anything serious, just a fire. They didn't understand. They went about their business like planting potatoes. They were planting potatoes, you see? They lived just like nothing had happened. Vasily Avramenko also took part in the nuclear disaster containment effort. He worked at the power plant when the explosion occurred. He was securing the perimeter of the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. For 36 long hours after the meltdown, even Pripyat residents had no idea and lived like nothing had happened. The day before the Chernobyl disaster, my wife and my daughter went grocery shopping, walked through town. Life went on, people went about their business. There was even a wedding in Pripyat. I know, because we saw it. So there was nothing out of the ordinary. Then they told us to close all the windows and clean all surfaces with water and detergents. But since I was in security, they told me that's it.
Но мы-то, в принципе, как говорится, в семью пришли, сказали, что все.
The evacuation was ordered on April 27, 1986. The radio announcement was made at 1:10 p.m., instructing people to come down and wait in front of their homes by 2 p.m. By 5 p.m., the evacuation was complete. It took less than 4 hours to evacuate 50,000 people from a city. Most people didn't own cars back then, so they had to take only things that they could carry. A total of 1,225 buses and 250 trucks took part in the operation.
Мы службу несли.
On duty, we slept on the ground during the first few days. Some slept in the trucks, others would throw some tree branches on the ground and slept on them. We made our own food too at first.
Сосны и спали. Кушать варили.
We'd give each other keys to our apartments to go in and cook.
Даешь от квартиры. Это самое. И зайдешь.
No one except our special commandant's office staff
Наши спецкомендатуры на территорию Припяти.
and the police had access to the zone, and except the firefighters. Now, picture this. You're right in the middle of a terrible disaster, surrounded by people suffering from the consequences, but no one still understands exactly what has just happened. And 6 miles away is your parents' house.
Не стал.
I didn't tell them. The last thing I needed was panic. If I came and said, "What are you doing planting potatoes?" the panic would have spread like fire. They were neighbors, all elderly people. Why start the panic? Let them live like they used to.
Guys, if you like my video and if you like what we're doing, I would really appreciate if you support us on Patreon, on Pioneer or on PayPal, and we try to make even more great films from new dangerous places for you. Thank you. All the links are in the description. Please donate.
2 days later, Vasily came with a team to evacuate the entire village. In 2 days' time, we evacuated all of them, the entire village, even some cattle.
Деревню, можно сказать, все полностью. Скот
I
там.
wasn't allowed to tell them anything. My mother asked me several times, "Son, did you know we'd be evacuated?"
Раз задавала, говорит, сыночек, а ты знал, что будет эвакуация деревни?
And I said, "Yes, I did, Mum." Vasily's parents were moved to live in a new home in the neighboring region, but his father never got used to it. Both parents eventually died of cancer.
Мой отец, покойный, Царство Небесное, он такой был возмущен.
My late father, may God rest his soul, he was so upset. They had lived there for so many years and had built their home with their own hands and effort.
Сам плотник это самое, и, говорится, сам дом строил своими руками после войны.
He was a carpenter, and he built his house all by himself after the war, and then expanded and upgraded it. It was a terrible shock for him and my mother. They wanted to go back home.
Они рвались назад на родину, а как и
When evacuation was ordered in Pripyat, they told all people,
что на 3 года, на три дня.
"You're leaving only for 3 days. Take only the essential things. No need to take more."
Типа на 3 дня.
Those 3 days became the rest of their lives. That's probably what my parents were told too, that they'd come back.
Вы на определенное время уедете, а потом назад приедете, да еще, ну.
Which is why I'm saying it didn't do them any good. A total of 116,000 people were evacuated from 188 villages and towns in 1986. It was the swiftest resettlement of such a massive number of people that ever took place in the 20th century. People were told they'd come back in 3 days. Many surviving witnesses say this. There is actually an explanation why 3 days. It most likely came from the evacuation protocols developed by the Soviet authorities in case of an enemy nuclear attack. Back then, they believed that the radiation level would be safe again at the impact site in 3 days' time. But the radiation contamination in Chernobyl was totally different by its nature, and half-life of that radiation contamination is decades, not days. Of course, neither contemporary scientists nor local residents knew anything about that back then.
Один из самых зажиточных дворов.
This was apparently one of the wealthiest households here. The house is impressive. They also had a utility shed, a sauna, and a huge cellar underneath all of this. And here, look, they had a barn for cattle, and it's still got hay in it. It's been here all this time. Let's see, for almost 40 years. These rolls of hay are almost 40 years old, prepared and abandoned. At least what's left of them. Some was probably eaten during the winter.
Где поваляться можно было, наверное.
The abandoned school building looks particularly spooky. The sheer horror of what happened almost 40 years ago becomes especially palpable here, in the lifeless school corridors, an abandoned and crumbling gym, and decaying classrooms.
Похоже, что здесь
This was probably the school's wardrobe. I can see many pairs of children's shoes left here. Probably indoor shoes, some slippers, gym shoes for PE classes, I guess.
Даже кеды, кто-то на физкультуру, наверное, пришел.
There are some bigger shoes, maybe a high school student, maybe a teacher's.
Взрослые такие туфли, не знаю, старшеклассников или кого-то.
All of them are still here, as on the very day they were abandoned forever.
Даже узнаваемые по очертаниям.
Children were evacuated from Belarusian schools in the contaminated zone before everyone else. They boarded evacuation buses right from the classrooms. Imagine what it felt like being one of them. The door opened and they put you on a bus and they took you away from home forever, without parents by your side.
Представляешь, что здесь...
All I can think of is people who used to be here. Kids, teachers. Someone was coming in, someone was leaving.
Люди радовались, ждали.
Everyone was happy the spring had come, looking forward to the summer break. And then it all changed completely and suddenly, irreparably, forever, in an instant.
Оборвалось, изменилось.
The primary school building is right across. The time stands still here as well. I can see some rusty motorbikes in the yard. I wonder how they ended up there. One of them is with a sidecar. I see that they were ripped for parts a long time ago. I find a school bag, a triangle, and an abacus. I wonder how old their owner is right now. About 50, I'd guess, if he or she is even alive.
И силосная яма.
Napoleon and the Silo Pit.
Это пыжиковая шапка. Ух ты. Какая.
War and Peace. The title is Deerskin Fur Hat. Wow, that's a rare book. What's this, I wonder? This is a notebook. And it looks like it's got a curriculum in it.
77-78 год.
It says 1977, 1978. Lab class, called to answer, called to answer. People, they didn't know what radiation was. They didn't see anything wrong, like nothing's changed, right? No one was allowed to take cats or dogs with them, mostly because there wasn't enough space even for all the people on the buses. Abandoned by their owners, dogs formed packs and began attacking people, so liquidators were forced to shoot them. We had to leave our dog too. My mum told me he was running behind the bus, and I told him, "Wolfie, go home, guard home, go." He stopped, turned around, and, you know, with time, as they said, dogs got wild and became a threat. People wrote about it. I know guys who went to chase and shoot them.
Ездили, отстреливали.
This is the local club. It's a wall short, but its cinema theatre is a great find for someone into local history. Look, they've got a poster for a movie they showed
То, что крутили.
5 Days Off, starring Kuznetsova, Yefremov,
Сова, Ефремов,
Lepikov, a
производство.
feature film by Moss Films Studios.
Фильм. Вот такие вот афиши вешали.
They had these posters to put on the Tonight board to inform people. What else have they got here? Bonneville's Heart, based on the same name novel by Dmitry Negishkin, a feature film.
Художественный.
Local kindergarten is right across the street from the club. Just look at these little beds stacked up against the wall. They don't make them anymore. Steel beds with steel nets for support. A dirty-faced doll is sitting on a shelf behind its owner, or perhaps forgotten in a hurry.
И смотрите, какая
Look at
печка.
this built-in stove, as big as this wall. I bet it kept this entire room very warm at winter. Just what the kids need. Everything is in a state of decay. Those of you who grew up in the Soviet Union must remember this
Не
party.
знаю, открываем или нет.
Should I risk it? Empty. Okay.
Пусто.
I mean, even if there was something, it's long since gone.
Все распалось, наверное, на гамму бету.
We go to the building next door. It's the local administration, or the village council, as it was called in the USSR. Stepping inside proved to be like walking into a time machine. This place was in the center of the local life.
Это прям советская
This
классика.
is a classic Soviet-style village interior. Look at these carved wooden railings. So old chic. Check out what I found in accounting. A strong box. And it looks like no one has left anything behind it. Hurry or no hurry, evacuation or no evacuation.
Сегодня зарплаты не будет.
No pay today, come tomorrow. This place is pretty cheerful. It does feel like this is where all the decisions were made, and people tried to be involved. Look at all the slogans glorifying the Soviets, portraits of the best workers, Soviet symbols, all in very good condition, even though this place has no heating in the winter and no one looks after it. The walls and ceiling are chipping away bit by bit, but if you clean the dust, some of these look almost like new. The conference room is also quite a sight. I can feel the festive atmosphere in this place, despite the fact that it's crumbling all over. Nonetheless, it's still got this distinctive festive look about it, thanks to this authentic Soviet Union-made tilling with 4-point star pattern. Look, some houses are completely intact, and some have broken windows and doors. As if it turns out, this was done on purpose by the disaster containment squads, known as liquidators. In this zone, they destroyed doors, windows, and even stones in houses to prevent people from coming back, to stop them from trying to reclaim their old properties. They damaged the houses on purpose to stop people from even thinking of coming back to live here, all because the radiation level in this zone was very high. It was literally life-threatening. Evacuating people from villages proved to be no easy task. The residents had roots there. They'd lived all their lives on this land, and to see some soldiers show up and tell them they must abandon everything at a moment's notice without giving a reason they would understand. There was no war, no wildfire, nothing looked changed at all. If they were to leave, who would plant all the crops whilst it's spring? If you fail in spring, you won't have harvest by autumn and no food for your family. Older people didn't understand why they had to go. Some resisted, some even tried to defend themselves. But the police had an order to evacuate all villages. So in 3 days' time, all these prosperous villages became ghost settlements, fit to serve as an apocalypse movie set. As time went, looters started to frequent them. They told us about 3 days, maybe in other villages they said it's for a week. Some people hid to stay, and they saw that a week had gone by and no one came back. And, you know, when I came back to Pripyat to pick up my things and documents, I saw all the shops full of merchandise and food. There were cars on the streets, baby prams, and not a soul around. I only heard the sounds of an APC patrolling the area, or a helicopter doing the same from the air. To talk to people in going, law enforcers told them they'd come back in a matter of days, 3 at most, and all people believed they were to return back home soon. Many cried, on and on. It was their home, their birthplace. And suddenly they were told to leave, leaving everything they'd earned with hard work behind. Of course, they told them it's just for a short while, although they knew no one is going to ever return. They were trying to talk people into compliance. Radiation level is usually higher closer to the houses. It will go up now. Because of the radioactive residue on the roofs, all of the radioactive dust settles there. Then the rains wash it off and melting snow too, and it all goes into the ground around the house and around the perimeter, making it more radioactive. Right, and I see that the meter shows 1.6 now, and that is already 5 times the maximum permissible dose. The worst thing about the radiation poisoning is that it's killing slowly, and there is no cure. Many guys got very sick really soon. Our unit was disbanded, and when I would meet any of them later, they'd tell me others were in the radiation ward at a hospital. And then the news would come that this guy's dead, the other one's dead, the third one is alive but suffering. It's terribly sad and scary. Vasily has been to the funerals of almost all of his friends by now. He is still holding on because he was evacuated from the exclusion zone pretty quickly, and he takes care of himself, undergoing a medical rehabilitation program every year or so. We are yet to learn more about the consequences of the Chernobyl disaster. We're only starting to, in fact. Valery Shmylov is a member of the Academy of Sciences. In 1986, he also took part in the disaster containment operations, which made him understand right from the very start that the consequences of this terrible disaster are a lot more massive than the authorities ever allowed to be mentioned to the general public. People were in their gardens, tending to plants, enjoying a little sun, and then suddenly they got their noses bleeding and bloody diarrhea. So what happened? The answer is acute radiation sickness. The official narrative was that only a few people got acute radiation sickness, only those who were very close to the reactor, like firefighters, but that's not true. The entire population of the area around Chernobyl suffered from acute radiation sickness. Today, Dr. Shimalov is researching the so-called pre-cancer condition. You see, the thing is that since this area has been contaminated, it has hot particles that can be carried with dust by winds and so on and end up lodging in people's bodies. Why are the hot particles so dangerous? Because it takes one to cause a person to suffer all sorts of consequences, while the doctors will not even know why, what caused them. Today, we have the technology to confirm its presence, but we don't know how to get rid of it. Also, as far as I know, there is no protocol for different diagnoses for hot particles in the system, so no doctors even try to look for it. The immediate death toll of the Chernobyl disaster was 31 people. 600,000 people who were involved in firefighting and cleaning the contaminated area were also overexposed to radiation. The World Health Organization reported that a total of 4,000 people died because of the Chernobyl disaster, mostly from cancer, but many researchers believe that this number is a lot higher, up to hundreds of thousands who died just some time after the incident. These graves don't look abandoned. Someone must be taking care of them. Do you want to go closer? No, it's fine. We'll stay here. And who is taking care of all the graves? Families? Sure. And if there's no family left, who then? Some friends or neighbors? Someone who knew that person? They'd tidy it up. Once a year, the zone gets an inflow of people because of the centuries-old Orthodox tradition of visiting the deceased family's graves, called Radonitsa. On these days, the checkpoints give free passage to everyone. What's interesting, this cemetery is not only well tended to, it is still active. There's no problem to get a permission for a new burial here. These are old graves over there, from before the incident. Over here, there are more recent burials from the 2000s, like 2005, even 2017. So former residents of the area can be buried here if they wish, without any problem, or anyone else for that matter, if such is their wish for themselves or their family. Getting a permit here is absolutely trouble-free. You only have to warn the checkpoint staff before you arrive with a hearse. So the cemetery keeps expanding that way and that way. And if anything, there is not going to be a shortage of space for new burials in this place. That's for sure. As for what you can't do here is you can't grow any crops. But they do harvest local honey, and not only for personal use, but for sale as well. Look, this is a local honey farm built by the reserve staff on one of the abandoned plots, which is barely an hour's ride away from the Chernobyl confinement structure. Honey from the exclusion zone. Tastes good. It's 100% natural honey. I can really feel it. Yes, it is 100% natural. Great honey. But, you know, when you sell it, are people okay with the fact that it originates from this place? Yes, people don't mind this. And they're buying? Yes, they're buying our honey. Do you check it for radiation? Of course, can't sell it otherwise. And how do you do it? Take it someplace? We send it to a lab, where they check it and issue their approval that it's safe for consumption. For every batch?
Каждую партию, да?
Yes. After seeing abandoned houses and forests without a single soul for miles and miles, this place appears all the more inspiring. They've even got an interesting kind of epitherapy space here. See how comfy it looks? You lie down on the bed and 1, 2, 3, 4, they start doing it while you're lying on top. They start buzzing. Yeah, that's right. And that's an epitherapy procedure. So it heals with vibrations? I don't really know about that. I mean, you get down on the bed on top of a beehive and it starts buzzing, right? Yes, that's right. You lie down and the bees buzz. And how does it help with health? I don't know, really. Does it protect from radiation? I don't know. Have you tried it? No.
А вы пробовали?
Нет.
All this hay has also been harvested here, in the zone. And it's most likely not fit for consumption by cattle.
Кормить, скорее всего, не стали.
But the European bison that live here in the exclusion zone come here for it. And people say they've not noticed any mutations in their population so far.
И никаких мутаций у них не замечают.
We have come to the bison farm, and this fence is there for our protection from the bison that weigh up to 2,000 pounds each. Bison have been here for centuries in Belarus, and they have always inhabited this zone too.
Жить спокойно до 25 лет.
Their lifespan in the wild is up to 25 years, And they've not presented any consequences of the radiation poisoning at all over this time.
Территории загрязненные у них просто не проявляется.
So no bison calves with two heads? No, that's just urban legends. Strange as it may seem, the bisons do come to the zone from all other corners of the forest because there are no people here and no one is hunting them. This contaminated area has become a safe haven for hundreds of unique species of animals and birds. The animals that are of great interest to researchers are field mice. They inhabit the upper layer of soil, never going deeper than 3 inches, which is the most contaminated layer of soil. There have been about 1,000 generations of field mice for the past 38 years since the Chernobyl disaster, and they have not presented any signs of being affected by the radiation poisoning. Well, I guess we're fine as long as field mice don't become as big as the bison. Field mice as the new bison? Right, that's not what we want. The exclusion zone is often referred to as the dead zone. Abandoned houses, empty villages, and the sound of the radiation meter informing every visitor of a danger still present here all remind you of the terrible disaster that happened here on April 26, 1986. Nonetheless, life seems to be prevailing, or rather, it has already prevailed.